Maple Street was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. It was a quiet, tree-lined road in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. The houses were neat, the lawns well-kept, and the neighbors friendly, at least on the surface. But at the end of the street stood a house that was different. It was large, Victorian, and shrouded in mystery. The locals called it the Silent House, because no one ever heard a sound coming from it, and no one ever saw who lived there. The windows were always dark, the curtains drawn, and the garden overgrown, a stark contrast to the rest of the neighborhood. The house had been the subject of rumors and speculation for years. Some said it was haunted, others believed it was home to a reclusive millionaire. But the truth was far more disturbing. In the summer of 1985, a new family moved into the neighborhood, the Mitchells. John and Karen Mitchell, along with their 2 young children, Sarah and Tommy, were eager to start fresh after moving from the city. The silent house caught their attention immediately. Unlike the other neighbors, they were not deterred by its ominous appearance. John, an architect, saw potential in the old structure, and Karen, a history enthusiast, was fascinated by its past. They decided to make it their own, despite the warnings from the locals. As they settled in, strange things began to happen. At first it was small, almost unnoticeable, a door that wouldn't stay shut, a light that flickered for no reason. But soon, the occurrences became more unsettling. At night, the family would hear footsteps in the hallways, though when they checked, no one was there. Sarah, who was only 8 at the time, started talking about an imaginary friend named Lily who she said lived in the house. She would describe Lily in great detail, a girl with long dark hair and a white dress who liked to play hide and seek. The parents dismissed it as the result of their daughter's active imagination, but things quickly escalated. One evening, Karen was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard Sarah laughing and talking in the living room. She walked in to find Sarah sitting alone, playing with her dolls. Karen asked who she was talking to, and Sarah replied, "Lily. She says she likes you, Mommy." Karen felt a chill run down her spine but brushed it off, convincing herself it was just a phase. But that night, Karen had a nightmare. In the dream, she was in the house, but it was different, darker, colder. The walls seemed to close in on her as she wandered through the endless corridors, searching for something she couldn't identify. She could hear whispers, faint and distant, like the sound of wind rustling through the trees. Suddenly, she found herself in the attic, where she saw a young girl standing in the corner, her back turned. Karen called out to her, but the girl didn't respond. As Karen approached, the girl slowly turned around, revealing a face twisted in agony, eyes hollow and black. Karen woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. From that night on, the atmosphere in the house changed. It felt heavy, oppressive, as if something unseen was watching their every move. John, ever the skeptic, dismissed Karen's fears, attributing the strange occurrences to stress and the adjustment to their new home. But Karen couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The children, too, began to act differently. Tommy, who was usually energetic and playful, became withdrawn and sullen. He refused to go to certain parts of the house, particularly the basement. He would cry and cling to his mother whenever she tried to take him down there. Sarah continued to speak of Lily, but her stories became darker. She said that Lily was lonely and that she wanted Sarah to stay with her forever. One evening, as John was working late in his home office, he heard a strange noise coming from the basement. It sounded like faint sobbing. Thinking it was one of the children, he went down to check. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old furniture and boxes left by the previous owners. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, the sobbing stopped. He called out, but there was no answer. Just as he was about to turn back, he felt a cold breeze brush past him, followed by the sound of whispering, indistinct but unmistakable. John froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they suddenly stopped. The basement was silent once more. John hurried back upstairs, visibly shaken. He didn't mention the incident to Karen, not wanting to worry her further, but he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in his bones. That night, he barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of what could have caused the strange occurrences. The next day, John decided to do some research on the house. He visited the local library, digging through old newspapers and records. What he found sent a chill down his spine. The house had a dark history. It was built in the late 1800s by a wealthy businessman named Charles Whitmore, who lived there with his wife Margaret and their 2 children, Lily and Henry. The family was well known in the town, but they were also deeply troubled. Charles was a strict and abusive father, and Margaret was said to be mentally unstable. One fateful night, a fire broke out in the house. The cause was never determined, but it was rumored that Margaret, in a fit of madness, had started it. The fire spread quickly, trapping the family inside. By the time the fire brigade arrived, it was too late. The entire family perished in the blaze, their bodies never recovered. The house was left in ruins for years until it was eventually rebuilt by a new owner, who later sold it after experiencing a series of inexplicable tragedies. John returned home, disturbed by what he had learned but unsure of how to proceed. He decided to keep the information to himself, not wanting to alarm his family. However, the strange occurrences continued. One night, Karen woke up to find Sarah standing at the foot of their bed, staring at them with a blank expression. When Karen asked what she was doing, Sarah simply said, "Lily wants you to come with us." Before Karen could respond, Sarah turned and walked out of the room. Karen followed her, but when she reached the hallway, Sarah was gone. Panicked, Karen searched the entire house but couldn't find her daughter. She woke John, who helped her look. After what felt like an eternity, they found Sarah in the attic, standing in the same spot Karen had seen the girl in her nightmare. Sarah was holding a candle, her face pale and expressionless. When they tried to take her back downstairs, she began to scream and thrash, shouting, "Lily doesn't want me to leave." It took both parents to carry her out of the attic, and once they did, she seemed to return to normal, as if nothing had happened. The incident was the final straw for Karen. She insisted they leave the house immediately, but John hesitated, still clinging to logic and reason. However, his resolve was tested the following night when he experienced the most terrifying event yet. John was awakened by the sound of someone crying. He followed the noise to the attic, where he found Sarah standing in the corner, facing the wall. The crying wasn't coming from her, but from somewhere deeper in the attic. As John approached, he heard the same whispers from the basement, only now they were clearer. "Come with us. Stay with us forever." Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and the candle Sarah was holding flickered out. In the darkness, John felt something brush past him, followed by a cold hand gripping his shoulder. He turned to see a shadowy figure standing behind him, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Paralyzed with fear, John couldn't move as the figure reached out, whispering, "You're ours now." In a burst of adrenaline, John grabbed Sarah and ran out of the attic, slamming the door behind him. The whispers followed him down the stairs, growing louder and more desperate. When he finally reached Karen, he was shaking, unable to explain what he had seen. The family left the house that night, never to return. They moved far away, hoping to leave the horror behind them. But the experience had scarred them deeply. Sarah refused to speak of Lily ever again, and Tommy developed a fear of the dark that lasted for years. Karen and John, though relieved to be away from the house, couldn't escape the feeling that something had followed them. Years later, the silent house still stands, abandoned and decaying, a place of nightmares that no one dares to enter. The locals say that, on quiet nights, you can still hear the whispers of the Whitmore family, calling out to anyone who dares to listen. The mystery of the silent house remains unsolved, a dark stain on the history of Maple Street.